History remembers conquerors, visionaries, and great leaders. It doesn't always mention the ones who pressed the wrong button. Some of these rulers inherited stable nations and left behind revolution. Others chased glory, power, or just one more bold decision, and accidentally set their countries on fire. They didn't always mean to destroy everything. Some thought they were saving it. Some believed they were modernizing it. A few were absolutely convinced they were geniuses. Turns out, confidence and competence are not the same thing. These are 25 leaders who destroyed their own countries by accident. Number 1. Nicholas II, the Tsar who ignored every warning sign. Nicholas II inherited a massive empire and handled it like a man hoping problems would solve themselves. He mishandled political reforms, ignored growing unrest, and dragged Russia into World War I with disastrous results. Food shortages, military failures, and public anger exploded into the 1917 revolution. By the time he realized things were serious, it was far too late. He abdicated, the monarchy collapsed, and centuries of Romanov rule ended. Turns out, stay calm and hope it passes is not a winning governing strategy. Number 2. Louis XVI, the king who ran out of money and ideas. Louis XVI didn't start France's financial crisis, but he certainly finished it. Massive war debts, including funding the American Revolution, drained the treasury. Instead of decisive reform, he hesitated, stalled, and made half measures that pleased no one. Bread prices soared, anger grew, and the Estates General spiraled into the French Revolution. Within a few years, the monarchy was gone, and so was his head. Governing a nation on the brink requires bold action. Louis preferred careful indecision. History preferred the guillotine. Number 3. Kaiser Wilhelm II, the emperor who loved big gestures. Wilhelm II wanted Germany to shine on the world stage. Instead, he escalated naval rivalries with Britain, issued reckless diplomatic statements, and backed Austria-Hungary with a blank check during the July crisis of 1914. World War I followed. For years later, Germany was exhausted, defeated, and politically shattered. The monarchy collapsed, and the Weimar Republic was born into chaos. Wilhelm dreamed of prestige and power. What he got was abdication and exile. Sometimes enthusiasm without restraint is just gasoline near a match. Number 4. Adolf Hitler, the dictator who overreached. Hitler rebuilt Germany's military and economy in the 1930s, gaining enormous popularity. Then came the fatal mistake, invading the Soviet Union while still fighting Britain. Operation Barbarossa stretched supply lines, underestimated Russian winters, and opened a brutal Eastern Front Germany couldn't sustain. Add declaring war on the United States, and the strategic math collapsed. By 1945, Germany was in ruins, divided and occupied. His ambition for total domination ended with Berlin destroyed. Conquering everything sounds impressive until you try to hold it. Number 5. Benito Mussolini, the strongman who chose the wrong side. Mussolini styled himself as the rebuilder of Roman glory. He centralized power, pushed nationalist pride, and dreamed of empire. Then he aligned Italy with Nazi Germany and entered World War II before his military was ready. Campaigns in Greece and North Africa faltered badly, forcing Germany to bail him out. Italy suffered bombings, invasion, and civil war. Mussolini was eventually overthrown and executed by his own people. Reviving Rome is ambitious. Doing it with poor timing and weaker armies? Less so. Number 6. Muammar Gaddafi, the revolutionary who ran out of revolution. Gaddafi seized power in 1969, promising reform and independence for Libya. For decades, oil wealth kept the system afloat while he funded foreign adventures and ruled through a mix of ideology and intimidation. But when the Arab Spring reached Libya in 2011, decades of suppressed opposition erupted. Instead of negotiating or stepping aside, he doubled down militarily. Civil war followed, NATO intervened, and the state collapsed into factional chaos. Gaddafi survived coups for 40 years. What he couldn't survive was his own refusal to adapt. Number 7. Saddam Hussein, the gamble that backfired. Saddam ruled Iraq with absolute control, surviving wars and sanctions through force and fear. But in 1990, he invaded Kuwait, miscalculating the international response. A U.S.-led coalition crushed Iraqi forces in the Gulf War. A decade later, after years of sanctions and tension, the 2003 invasion removed him from power entirely. His regime collapsed, and Iraq descended into instability and sectarian violence. Saddam built a system that depended entirely on him. Once he was gone, the structure didn't just wobble, it fell apart. Number 8. Robert Mugabe, the liberation hero who sank the economy. Mugabe began as a liberation icon, leading Zimbabwe to independence in 1980. Early years showed promise in education and healthcare. But over time, political repression increased, and controversial land reforms destabilized agricultural production. Hyperinflation spiraled out of control. At one point, prices doubled daily. The Zimbabwean dollar became practically symbolic. By the end of his rule, the economy was shattered and millions had emigrated. Mugabe wanted to correct historical injustice. Instead, economic collapse overshadowed everything he once stood for. Number 9. Pol Pot, the ideologue who emptied cities. Pol Pot believed Cambodia needed a total reset. When the Khmer Rouge took power in 1975, he emptied cities, abolished money, shut schools, and forced millions into agricultural labor camps. The result was famine, disease, execution, and the deaths of roughly 1.5 to 2 million people. Infrastructure collapsed, intellectual life vanished, and the country was devastated within 4 years. His radical vision aimed to purify society. Instead, it nearly erased it. Starting from year zero sounds bold, until you destroy everything that came before. Number 10. Haile Selassie, the emperor who couldn't hold the balance. Haile Selassie modernized parts of Ethiopia and became a global symbol of African independence. But at home, economic inequality, famine, and political stagnation fueled unrest. When famine struck in the early 1970s, the government's slow and inadequate response shattered public confidence. In 1974, the military deposed him, ending centuries of imperial rule. Ethiopia soon fell under a brutal Marxist regime. Selassie aimed to modernize gradually and preserve stability. Instead, cautious reform and mounting crisis opened the door to revolution. Number 11. Charles I, the king who picked a fight with Parliament. Charles I believed deeply in the divine right of kings. Parliament believed deeply in having a say. Instead of compromise, Charles dissolved Parliament repeatedly and tried ruling alone. When money ran out, tensions exploded into the English Civil War. After years of conflict, Parliament's forces won. Charles was tried for treason by his own people and executed in 1649. The monarchy was temporarily abolished. Insisting you answer only to God is a bold strategy. Unfortunately, Parliament had an army. Number 12. Francisco Macias Nguema, the dictator who emptied a nation. As the first president of Equatorial Guinea, Macias Nguema promised independence and national pride. What followed was paranoia, repression, and economic collapse. He purged officials, executed opponents, and drove out professionals, including teachers and doctors. By the late 1970s, a significant portion of the population had fled or been killed. Infrastructure crumbled, and the country effectively stopped functioning. Eventually, even his own military turned against him. When your leadership causes your country to empty out, that's not nation building. That's demolition. Number 13. Juan Perón, the populist who polarized Argentina. Juan Perón rose to power championing workers' rights and social reform. He nationalized industries, expanded labor protections, and built a devoted following alongside Eva Perón. But heavy state spending, economic mismanagement, and growing authoritarianism created deep divisions. Inflation surged, opposition intensified, and in 1955 he was overthrown. Argentina entered decades of instability, coups, and political whiplash. Perón inspired fierce loyalty and fierce opposition in equal measure. When half the country cheers and the other half fumes, long-term stability gets complicated. Number 14. Mohammad Reza Shah, the modernizer who moved too fast. The Shah of Iran pushed rapid modernization through his White Revolution, expanding education, industry, and women's rights. But political repression, inequality, and the powerful secret police alienated many citizens. Religious leaders, students, and workers united in opposition. By 1979, mass protests forced him into exile, and the Islamic Revolution reshaped Iran completely. His reforms aimed to strengthen Iran and secure his rule. Instead, rapid change without political openness created a backlash strong enough to sweep away the monarchy. Number 15. Ferdinand Marcos, the president who borrowed too much. Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines in 1972, promising order and reform. Instead, corruption flourished, political opponents were silenced, and billions of dollars were allegedly siphoned from state funds. Heavy foreign borrowing funded infrastructure, but ballooned national debt. By the 1980s, economic crisis and public outrage grew. The assassination of opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr. ignited mass protests, culminating in the 1986 People Power Revolution. Marcos fled into exile. Running a country like a personal bank account rarely ends well. Number 16. Nicolae Ceausescu, the planner who starved his people. Ceausescu wanted Romania debt-free and powerful. To pay off foreign loans, he slashed imports, rationed food, electricity, and heating, and forced exports at the public's expense. Citizens endured freezing apartments and empty shelves, while he built massive vanity projects like the Palace of the People. Surveillance tightened, dissent vanished, and resentment simmered. In 1989, protests exploded, the military switched sides, and Ceausescu was executed after a swift trial. Balancing the budget is admirable. Doing it by freezing your country? Less so. Number 17. Slobodan Milosevic, the nationalist who lit the fuse. Milosevic rose in Serbia, promising strength and protection for Serbs across Yugoslavia. His nationalist rhetoric escalated ethnic tensions, just as communism was collapsing. Wars followed in Croatia, Bosnia, and Kosovo, marked by brutal violence and international intervention. Yugoslavia fragmented into multiple states, and Serbia faced sanctions and isolation. Milosevic was eventually removed from power and tried for war crimes. He aimed to consolidate influence. Instead, the federation disintegrated, and the region endured years of devastation. Number 18. Leopold II, the king who treated a country like property. Leopold II of Belgium acquired the Congo Free State as his personal possession. Not colony, possession. Rubber and ivory profits flowed to Europe, enforced by brutal labor systems that caused millions of deaths. International outrage eventually forced Belgium to take control from him, but the damage was profound and lasting. Leopold sought prestige and wealth for Belgium. Instead, he left a legacy of exploitation that still shapes Central Africa's history. Running a country like a private business venture has consequences. Number 19. Anastasio Somoza, the strawman who built a dynasty. Anastasio Somoza Garcia seized power in Nicaragua in 1936 and established a family dynasty that controlled politics and much of the economy. Corruption became routine, opposition was crushed, and wealth concentrated at the top. After a devastating earthquake in 1972, relief funds were widely mismanaged, fueling anger. The Sandinista revolution eventually overthrew the regime in 1979. The Somozas wanted stability and control. What they built instead was resentment strong enough to ignite revolution. Number 20. Idi Amin, the general who drove out his own economy. Idi Amin took power in Uganda in 1971 through a military coup. Initially welcomed by some, his rule soon turned erratic and violent. He expelled tens of thousands of Asian Ugandans who played key roles in business and trade, crippling the economy overnight. Political repression intensified, and instability spread. By 1979, he was overthrown and fled into exile. Amin claimed bold leadership and national pride. What he delivered was economic collapse and international isolation. Number 21. Bashar al-Assad, the president who turned protests into war. When protests broke out in Syria in 2011, Assad had options: reform, negotiate, or compromise. He chose force. What began as demonstrations escalated into a full-scale civil war involving militias, foreign powers, extremist groups, and global intervention. Cities were reduced to rubble, millions were displaced, and Syria fractured politically and territorially. Assad sought to maintain control at all costs. He succeeded in staying in power, but at the cost of devastating much of the country he was trying to rule. Number 22. Porfirio Diaz, the modernizer who stayed too long. Porfirio Diaz ruled Mexico for over 3 decades, bringing railroads, foreign investment, and economic growth. On paper, it looked like progress. In reality, wealth concentrated among elites, while rural workers and peasants suffered. Political opposition was suppressed, elections were tightly controlled, and resentment grew quietly. When Diaz hinted at democratic reform and then reversed course, the Mexican Revolution ignited in 1910. He modernized the economy, but by refusing to share power, he destabilized the system he built. Number 23. Emperor Hirohito, the emperor who followed the generals. During the 1930s and 1940s, Japan's military leadership pursued aggressive expansion across Asia. Under Hirohito's reign, Japan invaded China, attacked Pearl Harbor, and entered a war against multiple global powers. The result was devastating: atomic bombings, massive casualties, and total defeat in 1945. Japan's empire collapsed, and the country was occupied and transformed. Whether constrained or complicit, Hirohito presided over decisions that led to ruin. Imperial ambition collided with industrial warfare, and the consequences were catastrophic. Number 24. Mikhail Gorbachev, the reformer who opened the floodgates. Gorbachev aimed to save the Soviet Union through reform. His policies of glasnost openness and perestroika restructuring loosened censorship and attempted economic change. Instead of stabilizing the system, they exposed deep structural weaknesses. Nationalist movements surged, the economy faltered, and hardliners attempted a coup. By 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved into independent republics. Gorbachev sought modernization without collapse. What he got was the end of a superpower. Sometimes pulling one thread reveals the whole sweater was unraveling. Number 25. James Buchanan, the president who watched the Union split. James Buchanan took office in 1857 as tensions over slavery were boiling. Instead of taking decisive action, he deferred, delayed, and hoped compromise would magically appear. When Southern states began seceding after Lincoln's election, Buchanan argued he had no constitutional authority to stop them. By the time he left office, the United States was on the brink of civil war. Leadership during crisis requires clarity and courage. Buchanan offered legal ambiguity and crossed fingers.